Da, 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 da. We are live. I was just talking with Wilson about some comic book history stuff here.
I'm all down for the comic book history, I tell
And
you.
you were talking about how they didn't always know the newsstand numbers.
From what I understand from the story that I got told, so as the legend goes, the editors would get numbers of books that sold.
Right.
They would get the numbers from the direct market, what's sold in
Right.
the comic book shops. But they were numbers of what was sold in newsstands and things like that. For a long time, the most important, and for not for a long time, for the longest time, all the money was coming from the newsstands.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
where
because
the
that's
comic
all
books
there
were
was.
born. That's where they were born.
Right.
And the comic shops were a specialty item that
Right.
popped up and again eventually overcame their difficulties, you know, because again, the comic book shops, God love them, they were guys who were just having a hobby.
Yeah.
Not many of them. Now I'm going back a few years, so not many
Right.
of them really had business courses and stuff like that. They just started. They
Right.
just started doing comics, and yeah, you learn as you go. But that became the direct market became the direct thing.
But the newsstand story goes that this is what I read. I forget where I read this. Some comics history thing. The DC publisher in the 60s was, which Donefeld was it? Irving Donefeld, the son.
Oh, I'm bad with the names of who
I
was
can never
running it
remember
back
which.
then.
There was a. I'm an asshole, and even here, all right. There was the original, one of the original owners of all who bought it from the captain guy who swiped it was Donefeld. Then his son took over. Irving Donefeld, I think it was in the 60s, was the publisher of DC, and he was, rich kid. His Connecticut rich kid had all the Connecticut rich kid connections. So it was like once a year, he'd make a trip around to all the distributors who were also run by sons of rich kids. So he knew them all. They were all his social circle. So he'd go from distributor to distributor and kind of get the numbers from them. And that's how he'd keep track of DC sales. Now, he retires. Carmen Infantino takes over as publisher. He's not the son of a rich kid. He has no idea about this sort of casual network of distributor. He doesn't get the numbers. He doesn't know to do that, and he's not in the inner circle anyway. So that's why the affidavit, when we talked about, I think last week or the week before, the affidavit returns they had in comics in the early 70s was so corrupt. That was one of the reasons, because Irving Donefeld wasn't there to check it, to make sure everything was above board with the other rich kids. They just started taking advantage of DC and Carmen Infantino because he had no clue about that whole thing, which is why, the distributors started selling the comics out of the back of the warehouse to people. I found that interesting. Who knew that even, like I said, there's something that you wouldn't even know existed if you didn't read it or someone didn't keep track of it years later.
Exactly. It's amazing on how there have been so many stories
Right.
that exist out there that makes me that is amazing that the industry continued. There was so many things against it almost from day one, it seems, and it keeps surviving.
Yeah, you mentioned before you love comic book history too, and Marvel Age. I actually pulled this off my shelf today.
Oh, okay.
One of the Fireside books.
Fireside Books, yeah. I think there were 4 books in total when Fireside started.
What was that?
I think there were 4 books in total when they started. There were like 4 books, and then another round of books came afterwards.
Origins of this is 79. This is this is when, after Origins and Son of Origins and that stuff, they started putting out these little trade paperbacks.
Oh,
there's
okay.
Captain America one. There's an oversized Hulk one. There's Captain America 1. There's a Fantastic Four 1, I think. I used to get these when I was a kid for Christmases and birthdays.
Yeah.
But I loved the Stan Lee introductions here because they gave you a peek inside and they gave you a peek behind the scenes at how comic books were made. But it also made me figure out that Stan Lee wasn't really writing what he said he was writing. Because he would say somewhere in there, because I can remember, like I said, I read this stuff over and over and over, and little clues would pop out to me. The biggest one being, you've read all this stuff, right? Have you?
I read a lot of them. I did not read that one, but I do have something I could show you.
This is my favorite printing of this Doctor Strange stuff too.
Now, I've only started reading this because I read it a while back and I put it away. But I have an original copy of The Secrets Behind Comics.
Oh, that's the one Stan Lee wrote in the 50s?
Stan Lee wrote it.
I have never seen a copy of that.
He was selling them. He sold them for $1. So it has the information in the back.
Wow.
Personal message from Stan Lee. And as you read this, there is no information here about not many of the other creators.
Right.
The blatant one that jumps out, and I haven't filmed this for my TikTok yet, so you're getting an exclusive, was how Captain America was made. And there's no information in here of Jack Kirby and Joe Simon.
Wow.
It seemed like it was an idea from the publisher that came up with it. He had an idea that Martin Goodman, during the next few weeks, Martin Goodman had the nation's top writers and artists submitting ideas for a new patriotic type character.
Yeah.
So a call went out.
If it wasn't for him wanting ideas, it would never have happened. Yeah.
Exactly. So again, this was the information that was out there, but again, who knows how much of it is real? Yeah. This was reprinted in the 90s.
Okay.
Hardcover edition.
First of all, this is my favorite printing of this Ditko Doctor Strange stuff. It is just because it's on matte paper. And it uses the original files with the original line screens. So the color's not especially dense. The color's nice and bright, but isn't glossy. And the blacks are really pretty dense. And it's just a wonderful printing of this stuff. I've always, even all these years later, since 1979, it still looks beautiful. But I don't know if you know when I forget which book it was, one of the Origins books, Stan Lee is talking about the origin of the Silver Surfer. And this is the first one that made me as a kid go, Stan Lee's not the writer of this stuff. I think that one is worth a fair bit lately, that Stan Lee book. Yeah, imagine so. A Stan Lee book from the 50s.
Oh, yeah.
It's got to be worth a few bob. But and the origin of the Silver Surfer, he talks about how he started getting the pages in from Jack Kirby. And there was this little guy flying around there. And I was like, Jack, who's this guy? And he's like, oh, that's the Silver Surfer. I figure if Galactus has a guy as powerful as Galactus should have a herald. And I remember saying to myself, how does the writer of the book not know what's in the book? But he described it just that way. There was this small figure. And at this time, I had not read the original Galactus trilogy because it wasn't available in the late 70s. They put it out in a Fireside book eventually, and I read it, and I was like, there was no little surfer flying around some panels, and Stan Lee asked him who that guy was. The whole first issue was, the whole first part of the Galactus story was about the Silver Surfer. And I'm like, oh, Stan Lee is lying to me. There was no way it happened the way, because you can look at the pages. There was no little surfer saying, I was like, oh, that guy's really cool. We should do more with him or something. It's like, no. So then I just happened to be reading the back of, there's the back of this, maybe the first Barry Smith stuff I saw it too. There's a Barry Smith Doctor Strange story in the back. Dan Atkins inking. Oh, good one too, Nightmare. But in it, we get a little one pager by Stan Lee with the how the story came to be. And one of the things is he actually gives reasons and numbers them. Reason number 1, it marks the last Doctor Strange story that I ever wrote. As a matter of fact, I had already stopped writing Awesome Adventures of Our Peerless Prestidigitator a few years earlier, but for some reason I very much wanted to script this particular yarn. And so I once again took typewriter in hand for my final fling with Stephen Strange at this time. And the reason was, then he gives reason number 2. Barry Smith had been wanting to do this particular story for a long, long time. And I'm like, well, if Stan Lee just wrote it, how could Barry Smith have been wanting to do it for a long, long time? Well, Stan Lee didn't write it. That's why. Barry Smith wrote it, and then Stan Lee scripted it.
So then I would guess
these are the little clues that helped me figure that out when I was a kid.
So when does the term Marvel method get coined?
In the 60s, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Because that wasn't, despite Stan Lee taking the credit for everything, he would always say they had a plotting session and then they went back and did it, and then he wasn't shy about the Marvel method.
Right.
Stanley Liver, yeah, but he would still and he even said he'll take credit for everything that's not nailed down. I mean, that was like part of his persona in these books.
Yeah,
he's like, oh, my memory's terrible, but I'll take credit for everything that's not. I think he even mentions in this one too that Ditko brought him Doctor Strange.
Yeah, I do recall reading that somewhere.
I think that's in this book, but he still takes credit.
Yeah.
I don't know where it is. I didn't read this for I'll have to read it, but that just jumped out at me. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember it. But it was like I used to devour these books. I read those Stan Lee intros over and over and over. But that's what, because I was trying to figure things out. I was trying to figure out how comics were made, who did what. But that led me to believe that, Stan Lee didn't. If the writer of the story doesn't know what's in the story, then he's not the writer of the story. I'm sorry, there's no way around that. 14-year-old Jared figured that out.
Right.
And it was a huge comic shop week for me this week. I ended up getting 13 comics.
Oh, wow. Because lately you've only been bringing home as little as 4?
Yeah, 4 was last week. I think the week before was 6. 5 or 6 is more normal to me.
Right.
I usually spend anywhere between $30 would be a big week. $20 is more normal. This week, I think I paid $53.
Wow.
For 13 comics.
Mm-hmm.
And that's with like
it's been a while since I dropped that much money on comics.
That bag you had that was taped over and unopened was pretty big. That had
that's definitely a $60, $70.
Yeah, that looked
when
like
when I do go, I do pick up a lot.
But I go every week. So
right.
$53 in a week for me is like, whoa, I don't have $53 a week, but
I keep trying to get out. I keep going, this week's it, this Wednesday's it, and it never happens.
Oh, I'm okay with spending the money. So it's my number one form of art and entertainment.
Right.
But have you read much Beto Hernandez? You're not in Love and Rockets.
No, I know of him, and I know of the works they've done, but I don't think I've ever actually read an issue.
They're terrific. This one, first of all, I didn't know this is Psychodrama Illustrated number 5. I have no idea why it's called Psychodrama Illustrated.
Okay.
I thought I'm not sure why this book exists. Besides, I think it because the Hernandez brothers, Gilbert and Jaime, have been doing Love and Rockets again. But I think Beto is just more prolific than Jaime. He's got more stuff. So he puts out like graphic novels but like Psychodrama Illustrated number 4 came out in January of 2021. I just checked was the date on it.
Okay.
And this one, the date is July 2022. So it's like a year and a half later. I saw this show up on my list of things coming out, and I was like, "What? There's another issue of Psychodrama Illustrated?" But a lot of his story, like this is a lot of his stories are like you could call this a done in one, but it's not really in that it's a lot of his stuff are like Mexican soap operas, I guess you'd call them.
Okay.
Because they all a lot of them take place in this little town called Palomar, which is a fictional Mexican town. Matter of fact, they're usually called the Palomar stories, even when they're not. But like all the characters, even if when they're not in Palomar, has some connection to Palomar.
Okay.
I get a 10% discount. I wouldn't call that a good discount, but it's a discount. You know, like if you order from those online stores, sometimes they give 30 or 40% discounts. I don't know how they stay in business. But like this is Fritz. She's one of the lead characters. And this is a character I hadn't noticed. Well, I haven't read it in a year and a half, so she might be a new character. But she's sort of a Fritz is like I think, and they've aged in real time. So I think Fritz is in her 50s now. And she was a Mexican B-movie actress who is now a famous B-movie actress. She's like well-respected, famous B-movie actress in Mexico. And she is a current B-movie actress who's has a rivalry and is all jealous of Fritz. So there's a lot of stuff. So it switches between. Oh, there's Chris Geruso.
What's up,
Good
guys?
evening, Chris.
Hey, Chris.
So it switches between their rivalry, and all of a sudden you get like little clips of the movies they've made, and it's very adult too. There's sex and nudity going on in it. But a really good. Maybe it's because I've been reading so much Gilbert lately. Because what like when the last issue came out like a year and a half ago, it's often like when and there's like 6 months between issues of Love and Rockets. Sometimes it can be a disjointed experience reading it from issue to issue. But I've been reading so much of it lately that I'm just kind of like I was really into it. I was like, wow, it's like kind of like it just made sense to me more than it usually does. But really good issue of and Gilbert's just I always, you know, whenever I think about which is my favorite of the Hernandez brothers, it always is whichever I'm reading at the time.
Right.
Because they're both so good. I mean, Jaime's art I think is prettier.
Okay.
But Gilbert's storytelling is just as involving as Jaime's, so it's good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But that was one of the 13 comics I got this week, and there were actually 12 on my pull list too.
Right.
I mean that's kind of crazy. I picked one up off the shelf, but it was a Dean Haspiel book, so I was like, and I would have put it on my pull list
if you knew it was coming out.
Because I pick up Dean stuff usually. Who's in with Chris Geruso in this week's Image anthology?
Hey-o.
The big question of the week is, Chris, did you go to the comic shop to get your own comic?
No,
you did not. Hey, there's Paulo.
Hey guys, what's going on?
Good evening, Paulo. How are you doing?
Hey, Paulo.
Hey, Paulo.
So you were showing some Hernandez?
Yeah, I was just showing the new issue of Psychodrama Illustrated, which I didn't know was still coming out because the last issue was dated January 2021. This one dated July 2020. It showed up on my list. I'm like, that series isn't over. Like I said, I'm not sure. I think this is just like an overflow series for Beto Hernandez because he's more prolific than Jaime. This could just as easily be in Love and Rockets, except there's not enough issues of Love and Rockets for Beto to put all his stuff in because Jaime's less prolific than him. But good, you know, more Palomar stuff about Luba, about the rivalry between these two B movie actresses. Good stuff.
I wonder if the brothers get along well when it comes to publishing new Love and Rockets, because if one of them is faster than the other two,
Yeah.
or smarter than the other two.
I think Beto just Fantagraphics just publishes more Beto. They must be okay, because Beto's also has a bunch of graphic novels, like those little graphic novels, the small hardcover ones, Chance in Hell, the one I just got 2 of because they sent me the wrong book. Those never appeared anywhere else. They were just appeared in graphic novel form. And that little Bible, that X-rated Bible adaptation he did, that never appeared anywhere else either.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on, we got something. Chris, I listened to your podcast, Cruise Control. You and Jared need to take that bit on the road. Funniest podcast I've listened to in a long time. I'm going to listen to them all. Don't expect that much banter on the other ones.
What?
When Chris is polite to his guests.
Hey, the other podcasts are good also.
I'd
And since there's a 0% chance that Jared and I were going to be going on the road, I'd say give the rest of Cruising Together is the name of it. Listen to the
Maybe
whole
you just need a producer.
Cruising Together. And I was also just showing off, Paulo, this, one of the Fireside books for Doctor Strange, which I devoured as a kid. And I loved the Stan Lee intros because they gave me a look behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
But I also figured out that Stan Lee didn't write all the things he wrote. Like in this, I don't know if you've ever read this one.
No,
but-
they kind of, the Brazilians published their own version of the Fireside books as issues number 100 of Captain America and TV Heroes. And TV Heroes had the first appearance, not a first appearance, but Doctor Strange's origin from Strange Tales number 115. And then they published one of the Roger Stern issues.
This is my favorite printing of this stuff too. The printing is really good on this book.
Yeah. The thing is, I read that thing when I was 8 or 9, so I had no reason to believe that Stan Lee was lying.
Well, I read these over and over. Especially, I read this from about ages 10 to 14. I devoured the intro, and I used to read them over and over because I really liked But by the time I was 14, I figured out that, here's a clue right here that jumped out at me as I was reading the part before the Barry Smith. Stan Lee gives his reasons for this Barry Smith Doctor Strange story existing. And he says it marks the last Doctor Strange story as ever wrote. He even had stopped writing Doctor Strange. He says, and so once again, I took typewriter in hand for my final fling with Strange at this time. He even said, I very much wanted to script this particular yarn. There's another clue, script. Because for reason number 2, he says, Barry Smith had been wanting to do this particular story for a long, long time. Now, if Stan Lee hadn't wrote the story yet, how could Barry Smith have wanted to do it for a long, long time?
Right. Yeah, as opposed to a kid, it's going to miss out on the clue. But yeah, there it is.
Sorry, I got the name wrong, Chris. It must have been because Jared kept asking if you guys knew how to work cruise control on cars. I have to go back and listen to that. It's been a long time since.
yeah,
Cruise control is for people who don't know how to apply pressure on the gas pedal.
Right here, I put that thing on 58 and just ignore the gas pedal. I don't have to weave in and out of traffic.
Yeah.
I'm okay just finding a nice clip and staying there.
Of course, being in Europe, everyone here knows how to drive stick, unlike you guys.
Stick. What other 1920s technology do you use over there in Europe?
What do you mean 1920s
You're still
technology?
keeping track of your banking on abacuses? We got transmissions over here.
We had an abacus.
Takes care of all that shifting for us. We're good.
We
to
had an
go.
abacus on elementary school in 1985.
I knew how to work an abacus.
I have no idea how to work it.
And my teacher didn't have a copy machine. She had a mimeograph in '85.
Wow.
She got mad at me because I dropped the alcohol needed for the mimeograph on the floor once.
I don't remember. Like, I was in high school from 80 to 84. And I think there were still all mimeographs then too. I don't think we had any copier machines. Not 100% sure.
Mm-hmm.
First copier machine I remember using was at my college in 86. The library had a copier machine, but they were well entrenched by 86. So
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't like it was a surprise to me that my college had a copier machine in the library. But I remember going, "Ooh, I can go." But that was like the first one ever that was convenient.
I think I first saw my copy machine in junior high. I think we had them.
In the early 90s, Marvel used to live and die by their copier machine. The copier machine broke down. Everything came to a halt. It was just like, it was crazy. Everything ran through that copier machine.
So another day of the inkers not getting their pages.
It was like, half of an intern's job was copying things in editorial. Mm-hmm. And we in the bullpen had to copy stuff too all the time.
And don't lose that yellow sheet.
Oh yeah, for copying pencils.
Mm-hmm.
There was a special yellow sheet for copying pencils that darkened the pencils as you copied them. Otherwise, they wouldn't show up.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. And then, copier machine would break down. Everybody just like, it'd be the line. No one could get things done. It was kind of crazy. And another of my 13 comics this week, Radiant Red. This is a 5-issue mini. This is issue 3 of the Radiant Black universe kind of thing. And this one was pretty good. The story's coming together now, and it's pretty interesting. This one, the story actually started early on. Well, she showed up in the earlier issues of Radiant Black, where she was the first one he saw with the same costume, only in black. They're kind of like the Power Rangers, it turns out. The guy who writes this was the writer of the Power Rangers comic book. And he's a big Power Rangers fan. So this is they all got costumes that are different colors that give them superpower. That's the only way it's like the Power Rangers. I don't know, but I don't know much about the Power Rangers. But when we eventually got her backstory, she's like a school teacher whose husband is a degenerate gambler and gambled away. They have to like sell the house now to pay they gambled away everything they had. So when she got this suit, the first thing she did was rob a bank because she was desperate and she wanted to make some money. Then she ended up actually almost killing the original Radiant Black. And we're on the second Radiant Black now in the comic book. But this story is about her. And the interesting part is that I guess criminals tracked down who she was. So now they're blackmailing her into being on their crew to steal something. And she couldn't even do anything with the money she stole from the bank because it's just like hidden in her attic. Because what do you do when you steal $500,000? She doesn't know how to launder it. She doesn't know how to do anything. So these criminals somehow tracked her down. And now in this, we get sort of what they want her to do and what the job is. And the job is really shady and dangerous. She's just like, I don't want to be doing this.
Yeah, you see, crime doesn't pay.
What was that?
Crime doesn't pay.
And there's some other guy with another
comics are about.
Another weird thing about this sort of superhero world they've created is that somehow these super suits of Radiant Blood, Radiant Black, and the other colors are powered by black holes somehow. They don't know how they work. They're aliens. They were given to them from aliens. But these other guys have these suits that power up, that draw their power from the Radiant suits. So these villains are kind of like, go ahead, beat me up. Yeah, hang out here. I power up when you... so there's this other guy here. His name is Shift, who's a teleporter. He's on the crew too, whose whose suit powers up by being near her. So he's like, hang around. I get stronger when you're around. See, Radiant Black is listed for some eyes. Yeah, Image said it's the most popular superhero universe since Invincible that they've had. Had to do an evacuation about a decade ago. That was on a school ground, and I started digging up pieces of a mimeograph. Found out the kids beat the hell out of it outside the school when they replaced it. Sounds like Office Space, yeah. But this has been a nice little mini series so far. I've enjoyed it. The art in it is pretty colorful and sort of, I guess you'd call it manga-ish, with a little, I don't know if you call it manga dwarfism or something. There's sometimes, and I've noticed it in Japanese comics sometimes, when all of a sudden the people are just kind of like little and short. They're average, everyday people. But all of a sudden they're just kind of like, is she all of a sudden 4 foot?
It's part of the storytelling with manga.
Yeah, I think it's part of the, like, all of a sudden, like, look at her at the sink there. She looks like, she's all of a sudden she doesn't look full sized all of a sudden. I mean, she generally looks pretty young. Where's that other one?
That looks like Petley was trying to draw like Frank Whiteley and failing miserably.
Yeah, like this one that's got all of them kind of around the table.
Yeah.
And it's like a style thing. It's not like it's not like I think it's bad drawing or anything. It's just a weird style thing to me. Who is it? The artist is David Lafuente.
Okay.
The colorist is Miguel Muerto. Wonder if this is done outside the U.S. You never know, because you get every ethnicity's name in the U.S. But sometimes when I see a creative team of all Spanish, Italian, French names, I'm like, I wonder if this is done in Europe.
Well, you can tell with Spanish names, but with other names, if the first name also looks foreign, they're foreign.
Yeah, it's like that doesn't tell me that this could have just as easily been done in Texas or New York as any place. But man, I gotta say I got a lot of good comics this week. There was just like 13 comics is an unusual amount for me. So, and here I had to bring up this topic because it cracked me up. We of course all know the term key issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Well, I have to say that term has been so abused. People sometimes ask me what a key issue is, and I'm like, that's anything someone can convince you to pay more for.
That's the most honest answer anyone will ever get.
Yeah. So I was listening to, I don't know if you know, he's one of the New York Warriors, Erod. He's there's a group of YouTubers called the New York Warriors after the movie. That you can go to their show. Big E runs their show usually, and they do auctions and stuff like that. They're really kind of they're very much into the collecting and flipping kind of market stuff. But I was watching Erod's show. He's always doing the top. I think some website thinks him up, and then he does the video on it. Top speculation comics for Captain Marvel movie, top speculation comics for the Eternals movie. Well, he was doing one. I think it was just I think it was like top picks for speculation for Bronze and Copper Age, and he was like, "Wow, this is a new term. This is a good one. I've never even heard this one before." Someone from the website called it a forever key, and I'm like. That's because so many key, because people say key issue so much now that so many of the key issues stop being key issues in a matter of months. That there's now a new term, a forever key. Hulk 181 is a forever key. I just started laughing when I heard that.
Yeah. Even before there were key issues stopped being key issues after a few months when the comic dropped out of the Wizard top 10.
Except for Forever Keys. I was just like, oh, a new and E-Rob was like, wow, I've never even heard that before. I'm like, but brand new it must be a Forever Key.
Definitely brand new.
Key issue has become so meaningless. When you call Hulk 181 a key issue, and then you call some random issue of some comic because some third-rate movie character is going to be in it a key issue, it starts to lose its meaning. So now we've got Forever Keys.
Yeah. Remember, kids, invest in that first appearance of Backlash.
You know what? That is a comic I always meant to read and never did.
Well, yeah. To me,
just because it was around forever.
Yeah, and I never really followed Brett Booth earlier in his career.
Nobody had. I always called, before he started doing DC work recently, I always called him like the guy who had been working in comics for the longest time who nobody knew existed.
What comic are you talking about?
We're talking about Brett Booth specifically, and Backlash was the comic that he drew in the 90s. Okay. For a long time, too. I mean, that comic was around for 50 issues or something.
That's impressive. I don't recall reading that book.
What was that?
Recall reading that book, but to have a 50-issue run, that's impressive.
Yeah, and I always mentor, and I always kind of look at it and go, I don't really feel like getting it this week because it never. But he was around for 20 years. I think he retired before he came back to work for DC. In like 10 years ago, he retired from comics. I remember reading that and going, "Oh, I wonder if anybody noticed." Because like he'd been drawing comics for 10, 15 years. And it was like nobody. I never heard anyone say I'm a Brett Booth fan. Once he started doing DC comics, and I started saying, "Wow, Brett Booth is back." I've never heard anyone say I started hearing people say, "Well, I'm a Brett Booth fan." So slap that key, raw pog, bro.
There were guys that you'd never give them a dime, and then all of a sudden they get good.
Yeah.
Like Jay Lee. The first time I saw Jay Lee, I was like, who the hell hired this guy?
I did not like Jay Lee's early stuff.
And then he went to Image to do Hellshock, and when he came back, because he was doing the Inhumans Marvel Knights mini,
right?
I was like, whoa, this is Jay Lee. I like this.
And
what happened?
That's another example for me. Besides him getting much, much better, I think he's a terrific artist now. I just saw some of his early Namer stuff pop up on Twitter or something. And I went, ooh. Now I remember why I wasn't a huge Jay Lee fan. But I actually met him in the early 90s, mid 90s it must have been. It was after Namer. It may have been after Hellshock. I can't remember what he came back to Marvel to do, but he's a West Coast guy. What was that?
Inhumans.
I would think it was before Inhumans either, because Inhumans was late 90s.
Yeah.
May have been right before. Like I can't remember, but either way, he spent a week in the Marvel bullpen. Just because for some reason he was in town for the week, and he'd come in in the morning, draw his comic, and he sat next to me, as a matter of fact, or across from me, or somewhere near me. And he was the nicest guy in the world. He was just, that actually made me pay attention to his work more after that. And luckily he got I really liked his Inhumans, was really good. But he was just a really nice guy. I haven't seen him. I never saw him before or since, but he was that week he spent in the bullpen with me. He was just the nicest guy in the world. So sometimes a guy being the nicest guy in the world can make you like their work better. But like I said, his work actually did get better too.
Mm-hmm. You know, the mini series is very famous among Portuguese comic book fans.
Yeah,
because it's the first time ever there's a Portuguese character in the Marvel universe.
The
guy appears in like 6 panels, and yet everything about him is wrong. But we're not offended. We just make fun of it.
They were like $16 then and $4 now. The Pogs. I was too old for Pogs, so I missed out on them all.
And issues of Backlash too.
And issues of Backlash. Backlash was around. Here's a book I want to try. I think there's a new issue coming out. Tarot, Witch of the Black Rose.
Jim Ballant?
Jim Ballant does it. It's one of these adult comics. I think at least there's nudity in it. I love the covers on them. One time a few years ago, I collected all the covers digitally. The only place you could find a lot of them were on eBay scans. I was just like one night, I'm like, let's find some. And I always kind of wanted, but it's like I've never. I think issue like 130 is coming out. I'm like, if the comic has been around for 130 issues, I really should try an issue. Even if it's not my thing, I really should try it.
Yeah, sometimes there are those indie comics that last for a long time, like Soul Searchers. I've never seen an issue of Soul Searchers, but apparently that was like a comic made for people, a favorite for people who made comics.
Wow.
Because they all said they liked it.
Soul Searchers. I think I may have had an issue or two of that only because Bob Wyacek inked them, and so he gave me some comp copies. A couple of random issues I read. And also, I just read something. Hold on a second. I have to look. Let me get this week's comic shop weekly. It's back here.
And the Dark Tower. Dark Tower also lasted for a long time.
The Dork Towers?
Dark Tower. It's
Dark
by
Tower.
John No, Dork Tower. It's one of those gaming comics.
I just saw the latest issue of that, which I never bought. And I was like, I should buy an issue of this. Then I looked it up, and it was like $10 for the issue. And there was just a few pages of comics in it, and then gaming modules. So I'm like, maybe I don't need to try this.
I think one of my books was reviewed in an issue of Dork Towers, and I didn't even know about it. And someone mentioned it, but I was never able to find a copy of the book. It wasn't a good review, by the way, but it was like, oh, somebody reviewed one of my creator-owned books. That's amazing. They didn't like it, but I still like the idea that somebody read it.
I was like, this has to be a typo. This can't be right. Elvira, another Claypool title like Soul Searcher was Elvira, which was around for a long time. But this here says, the hardcover, they're coming out with a trade paperback of the hardcover, reprinting the first 267 issues of the Claypool Elvira series by Kurt Busiek and Richard Howell and others, sold out instantly. So kudos for Dynam. There can't be 267 issues of Elvira, right?
There's
a lot of issues. It's in the hundreds at least.
Right.
Like 267 in one book?
But I think she hosts the book. I think they were kind of like Tales from the Crypt.
No. It was an Elvira. I remember I have a couple of issues of it. Once again, Bob Wyacek inked them. So I got Spowit video, got a review in Hustler. Wow. Spowit is his King Spowit's band. Spowit's video got a review in Hustler. I do not have the copy. Oh, that's brutal. And hello to, the Incredible Hunk. Early Jay Lee, Keith Giffen's crazy image stuff, Sam Keith, and early Stephen Platt were artists I loved as a kid because of their energy and sketchy style. Yeah, I can see that. Definitely. I've never been a Sam Keith fan either, but I understand. I can get it. There are some guys who I don't like, but I get it. Good evening, all. Second barbecue of the year underway while I listen. Okay. But I still can't believe there's 267 issues of Elvira. I'm going to have to look up that.
Maybe
you're missing out.
Maybe if you count all of her appearances throughout the decades in a bunch of publishers.
But the soft cover is $40. The soft cover omnibus is $40. I'm like, if you're paying $40 for 267 issues, or maybe that's just volume 1. I don't know how that's possible. Maybe it's just volume 1 of 267 issues. It's got to be a typo. Another comic I got this week that was just terrific, a really good issue, and I really liked the art on it. It's Department of Truth, issue 18. And the guy just did, who's the artist on this? Martin Simmons, Simmonds. Letterer, Aditya Bidikar, and James Tinian IV on words. But he just did, he usually, since a lot of this is talking, this book, rather than action, the artist gets really creative with some of the layouts and techniques. And some of his color techniques have just gotten really creative and really, like, he's got this sort of TV line screen over a lot of the beginning. And then, like, this diner scene, he just uses a lot of colors and textures and stuff just to make it interesting. And he did a real good job just making it interesting. Like, I love this guy. Like, that's just a guy sitting down there talking. And he's using sort of glitch effects and stuff. But then, like, in the second half of the book, he switched over from sort of glitch effects to using this, digital ink splatter. And he just does a really good job of defining the space. And I like, taking, shots of just people talking and making them interesting with technique. Like, look at this. Here they are sitting in another diner, but he's got this crazy perspective on it with this weird table sitting at that diner. And once again, the establishing shot has got some great texture and sky. And I was really, really impressed. But here's a nice splash page. That's just an interesting piece of artwork. And, just some really nice storytelling, some really nice art, and the script is good too. And like I said, this is all about this. Department of Truth is a book where, and some nice artwork. Vermilion did some great black and white ink splatter. Yeah, this is a book where it's about conspiracies. And the Department of Truth is the government exists because if enough people believe a conspiracy, it becomes true and changes history. So the Department of Truth tries to keep people, at least in the United States, from believing conspiracies. And the Soviet Union, they found out about our Department of Truth, and they made their ironically named Department of Lies in order to combat our Department of Truth. And there's like there's like a couple issues about Bigfoot, an issue, and who runs the Department of Truth? Lee Harvey Oswald, who's the head of the Department of Truth. So this issue was actually took place is about the fall of the Soviet Union because we won the Cold War. One of the reasons is because our Department of Truth was better than theirs. And the head of their Department of Lies is like, you think you've won, but you haven't. You've unleashed some dark things now. And there's been like a dark things motif behind this whole story that's been good too. So it was an interesting, and then of course more dark things started happening. Oh, but one of the interesting things about this is the moon landing conspiracy. What happened was, we weren't going to make, we weren't going to, the powers that be thought we weren't going to be able to land on the moon by the end of the decade. So Lee Harvey Oswald was like, let's see if we can use the Department of Truth to get this done. So they managed to convince everybody that we landed on the moon. So that changed history. So we, in fact, did land on the moon. And all that technology that we couldn't quite work out for landing on the moon was retroactively created. So we now had all that we now have all that technology for landing on the moon because of whatever this force, there's a name for whatever this force is that reshapes time if enough people believe it. So I found that an interesting story. That was one of the earlier issues.
That does sound very interesting.
It's good stuff. I still can't find the Department of Truth locally. The last few years have ruined conspiracy theories, though. Looks like good art. Oh, yeah, I understand what you mean. I understand what you mean.
See, if that book exists.
What was that?
The book may not exist. Jared might be making this all up, and he's going to will it into existing. That's why no one can find the book.
No one can find a book until everybody believes in it. DOT is a great. See, 62 Lefty Blues believes it's out there, so he can find it. Tit Goblin doesn't believe it's out there, so he can't find it. That's how the Department of Truth comic works. But that was an exceptionally good issue.
There are some good conspiracies that are worth keeping. Like in 1431, Portugal already knew that North America was there. So we sent our secret agent, Christopher Columbus, to Spain to make sure that they went to that wilderness that nobody cared about, North America. So we had free route to the real India.
Ah. There was no spices over there in North America.
Nope, only hamburgers.
Potatoes. They had potatoes. A forever key. That cracked me up when I heard that.
You know, there was a time. Well, sorry. So there was a time at Marvel when I was reading that there was a. I don't know which comic book price guide was trying it, but they were trying to push the concept of, the word escapes me at the moment. The whole concept of, damn it, don't recall the name of the word.
He forgets the word and the concept.
I forget the word itself and the concept. It starts with a P, and I don't recall what it is. But it's basically, are there comics that were the test to make characters later on?
Prototypes. That's what.
Prototypes. Thank you. I just went out my mind because was there a prototype to Doctor Doom before Doctor Doom? Because the names were reused.
Right.
Was there a prototype to Uncle Ben and Aunt May?
Because Steve Ditko drew every old person to look like Uncle Ben and Aunt May.
And Aunt May, exactly. there's a story where there's, I believe it's a niece and not a nephew that becomes a mermaid in one of those pre-stories.
Mm-hmm.
And there was kind of a push to go, are these the prototypes of those characters to make
that,
those books worth something more than they already were? And again, the Hulk, because the name was used before with those monsters.
Right. Prototype Hulk.
Yeah, so that it was just a fascinating concept that started, and then that's where I learned, people just wanted to make those books worth something, sell stuff. And I had pitched, why don't we do a prototype trade paperback and reprint these books? And that's where I found out, I was like, no, we're not going to do that because that's just going to basically prove this theory that's not a theory and make those books worth something now. So it was like, it was interesting that there were people at Marvel who was aware of that concept and wasn't going to play that game. To me, I was like looking for just a way to reprint some books from the 50s.
Wanted some reprints.
That's all I wanted. Really, is these old books.
Canadian Department of Truth is run by Sasquatch, says Titcom. No wonder Sasquatch is no good at getting comic books into stores. Columbus was no doubt a Portuguese agent. Returning from his discovery, he spent a week in Lisbon and met with the Portuguese king before going to Spain.
Well, the thing about the prototypes, the concept was made up so they could sell some of those they could hike the prices on some of those monster comics. Although, yeah, they did recycle a lot of names. Not only Hulk, also Thor. There's a Sandman. There's a Magneto.
Yeah.
There's even an Electro.
There's an Electro. There's even a Metallo, and Metallo is a DC character.
That reminds me of another story I heard.
But there were two things about Dr. Doom. Not only is there a monster called Van Doom's Creature, there is a monster which is the monster in the Iron Mask, which has Dr. Doom's mask.
Yes.
And that predates Fantastic Four #5 by a year.
Wasn't there also a Dr. Droom as well as Dr. Doom?
Yes.
Dr. Droom appeared. It was the first adventure strip created after the Atlas implosion. It appeared in Amazing Adventures number 1 to 4 and 6. And those stories were reprinted in the 70s in Weird Wonder Tales. The character was redrawn, and he became Dr. Druid.
That's right. I think I had a reprint of that from the 70s. In the 70s. That reminds me of another story I heard somewhere. I remember hearing the story like somewhere in the 2006 and 7s, wherever, that a few years before, like in the early 2000s, a bunch of comic dealers got together and decided they wanted to see if they could drive the price of a worthless comic up. And that comic was Night Nurse. So they all started bringing Night Nurse with them to their comic shows and putting like $20 price tags on them. And sure enough, they drove up the value of Night Nurse. And now it's actually a sought after comic. And Marvel even brought it back years later.
A sucker is born every minute. Now, what would be funny if they managed to convince people that the 60s comic Linda Carter, Student Nurse, is the Linda Carter from Night Nurse, because they don't look alike.
They don't look alike. She had a different haircut. That just reminded me there's 2 more facsimile editions from Marvel coming out in June. Tales of Suspense number 57 facsimile edition, and Tomb of Dracula number 1 facsimile edition. I just enjoy those facsimile editions, so I'm always happy to see some out because I like reprints of Forever Keys. If they're just keys, I don't want them. That's like, I just saw that Image is putting out, what is it, a 30th anniversary facsimile of Cyberforce number 1 for $4 or $5. I'm like, Cyberforce number 1 doesn't even go for $4 or $5. The original.
They might as well do a Cyberforce was written by Mark Silvestri's brother, who nobody's ever heard of since. The thing is, they might as well just do a 100-page comic with the first 4-issue arc, because it's a pretty close story.
Yeah,
they charge $8 for it.
I think I have like 20, 25 issues of Cyberforce that I bought in the 90s. I don't even remember them. It was just one of those books I bought. It was okay. And then I put it on the shelf. It's like they made no dent in mine.
Yeah. Well, Mark Silvestri, known for drawing mutants, comes out with a comic where the characters are mutants. But they're not just any mutants. They're cybernetically enhanced mutants.
Of course.
Because why not? I mean, yeah, okay. When you look back at it, I mean, it's 90s. I remember that I bought Cyberforce and Wildcats because being teams, I was more interested in them than in Spawn.
They were decent books. They really were.
They were fine. We joke when I worked in the comic book shop. We did joke around that, it was great what they did. They went to create their own thing.
Mm-hmm.
So all these artists left. Not one of them thought to bring a writer with them, but there's still many of them are still around and they're still pulling out books. So
Alan
more
Moore,
power to them.
And
when
people
Alan Moore
still
and
talk
Travis-
about all of them.
Yeah, when Alan Moore and Travis Charest, how do you say his last name? I would say Charest, but I don't think that's it.
I always say Charest. I always say
it's-
Charest.
Yeah,
Travis
apparently it
Charest.
is Charest because it's from Quebec.
Okay, Alan Moore and Travis Charest did the Wildcats. That was really good stuff. I enjoyed that a lot.
Wildcats was beautiful.
That was some really good. Enjoyed that thoroughly. Let's see another comic I got this week. Monstrous, number 40. I like it. Hard to believe there's 40 issues of anything out these days.
Mm-hmm.
But this story arc has really turned into a body horror story. It's amazing because the lead character, what's her name, Meiku, the half wolf. She's the lead character and namesake of this Monstrous because she's like this. I guess she's part of a royal. It's hard to describe exactly what's going on because it's really high fantasy with the blood court, the court of dusk, the court of dawn, and they're all interacting and there's a war going on and there's all sorts of politics going on. But and her mother was like one of the lead figures in this world before she died. And now everybody's kind of after her because she's got this monster inside her too, blah, blah, blah. But right now, I guess you'd say I think the Dusk Court has her sedated and is like trying to experiment on her to figure out what's going on with her power. And it's like the immortals of this Dusk Court who are experimenting on her. And the body horror stuff comes in where she's trapped in her own body in this dream with this monster. She can't get out. Meanwhile, the experiments they're performing on her, this one immortal it looks like a snake, giant snake, and he swallows her. And that's how he experiments. He's able to do stuff to her while she's inside him as he's like, who knows how it works, but he's like always vomiting her up when he's done with his experiment. It's just like, ugh. And then in this one, it's like the body horror stuff continues where he's experimenting on her, but some other character does something where her mind is still not there, but her body comes back and just starts attacking. And so he's like, oh my God, this is her. He's like, we have to do something. He's like, her mind is gone, but her body is. And so it's just the last few issues have been like so body horror. And also her, I guess this would be part of the body horror. Her friend, this little wolf, this little fox creature is trying to get back into her mind. So she ends up like transporting herself into her mind. And now she's caught in this crazy mind world where her body is getting subjected to crazy stuff. So it's amazing to me the body horror twist that Monstrous has taken, but really, really good issue. Scary stuff. Hey, Chris, what page are you on?
235.
Whoa. 39 is your finish line?
236 is my finish line. 30.
So, ooh. But are you going to have to go back and look it all over and fix things?
Yeah, but there's already like a round of corrections waiting for me.
But at least the bulk of it. So
yeah, and then there's going to probably be another one after they get this latest batch of
once
colors.
they see it all. Saul says, once again, Chris's action figure collection makes me jealous. I'm on eBay right now. Bye. I can't help myself. You don't get an action figure collection like that overnight.
Smitty's entire G.I. Joe collection is sitting in the lounge right now. But it's all.
Is he having a big battle with them?
No, he's just been going through them all and finding out like pieces that he's missing.
He's inventorying them.
Yeah, and hang on.
I know what that's like. I've been going through a lot of my Marvel, my Toy Biz toys basically finding them and then trying to put them together.
He's been
seeing which
moving
ones.
them from plastic bags and putting them into these
Let's see.
these plastic cases.
Oh, very cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Better for display.
For possible display, easier to organize, etc.
Yep. Easier to look through.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's like hundreds of them out there on the table.
You can't get that overnight. Just got to max out a few credit. You can get that overnight. Just got to max out a few credit cards. Easy.
Or you look for deals.
I wouldn't have action figures, but I wish I had more money and room for car miniatures.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of Hot Wheels toys, the Hot Wheel cars, but I only collect the ones if they appeared in a movie or TV show. Because if not, I just see cars all over the place.
Yeah.
So it's like, Back to the Future car, the Batmobile. Is, every time I see a Batmobile, I pick it up, even if I already have it. And it's one of those things is that when I was a kid, I wanted it, couldn't get it. They stopped making it for years. And it's like, I now spend my adult career trying to make the 10-year-old me happy. And that kid is a pain in the ass.
I have a few miniatures that auto manufacturers gave me when I was in media presentations. My favorite one is a 112 Auto Union C-type streamliner, which I've shown before on the show when we had Daryl on, and it was because it's a car that was sponsored by Adolf Hitler.
Oh wow! Okay.
I was just going to ask you what scale you'd like to collect.
143 is 143 is good because you can have more stuff.
Okay.
124 is a nice size, but it fills up pretty quickly, and you need a place where you can have a strong boards to put all of the 124 miniatures.
Right.
112s and 118s are too large. 143s are nice. Most miniatures are 143. 157s are pretty good because you can have those little ones, and if they can get a lot of detail into those little ones, they look very cool.
I think Matchbox and Hot Wheels are 164. I think
164. That's what I collect, and then what I do is I put those into. I go to Michael's when they're having a sale on shadow boxes, and use shot glass boxes because if you turn them to the side, a Hot Wheel car fits in those perfectly into that type of thing. As a matter of fact, one of these are shot glass holders. And once the place is cleaned up, I'll give an official tour.
Oh, I saw a really cool video today from Earl Grey. You guys know him? He's a comic book YouTuber. He used to be on Sleepy Reader and Comic Cracks Sunday show. He was on for a few months there. But he's German. But he does a comic book YouTube channel in English too. But he was just showing. He linked to the video, but the video's in German. But he showed us some of it. He now makes boxes for his comic book collections, and he makes them out of I think it's 3mm press board, which you can cut with a utility knife or a box cutter.
Right.
So he gets these this 3mm press. He like linked to this guy who shows you how to do it. He's like, you can follow along even if you don't know German. But they looked really cool because then because they're solid boxes. There's no give to the 3mm, even though 3mm is only 1/8 of an inch. But that's pretty solid, light press board. And he puts either his trade collections or the issues, and he custom builds them to the amount of issues or the amount of trades. That way, he likes it better than bags and boards and stuff because he can just pull the whole thing down. Mm-hmm. And then he like decorates it. He makes printouts and glues them down to the outside of the wood.
Yeah,
really nice.
Yeah, when you look at them, they look like genuine slipcases.
Yeah, they really do look nice.
Very cool.
It's cool looking stuff. I mean, but I was looking up how much that wood was, and it's not cheap.
Mhm.
It's like for 6 12 by 18 sheets of it was about $35. So, because I was thinking about making some for my art, because I've so much art I've made over the years that I made foam core boxes to keep a lot of it in, and they're just ugly. But if it's going to cost me hundreds of dollars to replace them, I'll leave the ugly foam core because they're in cabinets anyway.
Oh, you start with one, you make whatever has the smallest one, and then go from there.
Yeah, Earl Grey's got a good channel, King Spout.
I would have to check. I would have to check it out.
Wood prices are crazy now. Yeah, that
remember, Jared, do you remember when Thomas made a foam core guitar?
I remember when Thomas made a foam core guitar. Matter of fact, I have pictures of Maeve Kreger when she was a toddler holding the foam core guitar. Michael Kreger's daughter. Michael Kreger is an artist. He worked in the Marvel bullpen. He was also an editor for a while. I think he teaches at the Kubert School now. He did a character in the 80s for Dark Horse called The Zone, which appeared in Dark Horse Presents in its own one-shot. He had a daughter with Lisa Hawkins, who also at the time worked at Marvel. So she would occasionally come into the bullpen in like the late 90s. And she was a toddler. She loved Thomas's foam core guitar.
How could you not?
I think he gave it to her. She took it home. Thomas would often make things out of foam core when he was avoiding work.
Yeah, but that was after he'd already put in his notice, I think.
Yeah, that's when he was really... Now, he was doing that before he was...
Yeah, I think the guitar was after he'd gotten the new job, and he was just...
One of my favorite circular stories of working at Marvel was... you have to understand, working in the bullpen in general was a dead-end job. You'd work there for 3, 4, 5 years and then quit and find another job because there was not much advancement. If you wanted advancement in any kind of career, you had to go somewhere else. Especially in the days before it was computerized and when you were just pasting balloon, when you were doing hand paste up all day. So my friend Ed Murr had been there. I got another story about him and artwork. Had been there for about 4 years at this point. So he was ready to move on. He just didn't care. And this happened to everybody. You'd get, after about 4 or 5 years, you'd get completely burnt out. You couldn't take it anymore. And so Ed was goofing off most of the time. And this is when Johnny Thomas Velasquez, who we just said before, made the foam core guitar, when he was new. He was 23 years old, happy to have a job, brand new, working at Marvel Comics. And so Virginia Ramita was our boss. John Ramita's wife was the traffic manager and in charge of the bullpen at Marvel. So one day she called Ed in to her office and gave him the shape up or ship out speech. So he went, okay, I'll ship out. Because he was cooked. He was done. And I just remember Johnny and Thomas going, oh my God, he just said, I'll ship out. They couldn't believe it that someone got the shape up or ship out speech and just said, they just went, all right, I'll ship out. They gave us 2 weeks notice and left. So cut to 5 years later or whatever it is. And Thomas is just burnt out. He just can't take it anymore. He starts looking for a new job. And everyone knew he was looking for a new job. It was like everyone kind of expects you to. Because, like I said, that's what the job... It wasn't... There was very few slots for advancement. So almost everybody worked there for... Well, except for the bankruptcies where everybody got fired. Worked there and then left. So one day... like I said, Thomas is completely burnt out. He just looks over at me and goes, I know exactly how Ed Murr felt now. I was like, what? It's like, they gave me the shape up or ship out speech. I'd be shipping out right now. Now we'll cut to 5 years after that when Chris Gerusso's ready to leave. He's been there. How long were you there,
What?
Chris?
I was there.
He doesn't remember telling me this line. I've told him this before. How long were you there, Chris?
6 years.
6 years. So he's good and burnt out too. So Chris gives his notice. And I'm just talking. I'm like, oh, you gave your notice. I'm like, I said, well, you got any plans? What are you going to do? He's like, no, I've got no plans. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, I'm going with the no plan. He's like, I just noticed that everybody who quits is happier. So I'm quitting. I'm like, okay. But I just love that line. I just noticed that everybody who quits is happier. So that's why Chris quit. But like I said, that was the job. 4, 5, 6 years, you were done. Because there was no place to move up. I was different in that I was a freelancer and I came and went at times.
I tried to get out a few times and they wouldn't let me go. in the sense of not out and out quit, but more of like, oh, every time that there was an opening in editorial, I try to go into it.
Right.
And so I always interviewed to be an assistant editor to go that route.
Because there was more advancement there.
Yeah, and then there were offers, but they were just across. So it wasn't really much of a change. It wasn't going to be a a bump and raise or anything like that. It was just to move me fully into the bullpen to work in the stat room. That was offered once. And it was like, but it was just a lateral move, so there wasn't really much
you would have
change.
been gone then too.
Yeah. So it's like, all right. And then, the advancements at Marvel were more of the sense of, can you hold this key so people could get into the library? And then next thing you know it, I'm running the library. I'm not just holding a key anymore. Could you hold on to these items in case someone needs them? And it's like, yeah. And I heard once I left, 7 people replaced me because they had to break everything up across.
Right.
And it's like, for a while, it's like, that was amazing. I did a great job. And then you realize later, it's like, damn, they took good advantage of me.
Yeah. I did a job with 6 people.
And always getting told, yeah, we can't give you a raise. It's like, really? Because we just made $4 million on Spider-Man. It's like, yeah, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't.
Yeah, if you're good at your job, you get stuck doing more work. If you suck, you get promoted as manager. Yeah, I've seen that happen a lot of times.
Yep. And different editor-in-chiefs. I would go in and go, hey, can I do this instead? It's like, no, we need you where you are. So,
yeah.
All right. I'm not bitter.
You said all right. Oh, I'll tell you the Ed Murr story I was about to. You remember Dial H for Hero?
Yes.
Comic from the one from the 80s, where you could write. They would have the Dial H for Hero thing was they had dials on their rings or their hand or something, and you dial it, and they turn into this superhero for an hour, or however long it was. But they had this thing where you could send in your superhero, and they'd make him in Dial H for Hero. So all of a sudden, it's like, and I think there was 2 of them, 2 teenagers, a boy and a girl. The boy would dial his ring and turn into Owlman or something. The girl would dial her ring and turn into Cheetah Lady or something. And they would say, Cheetah Lady, created by Wilson Ramos Jr., age 10 or something like that. And my friend Ed Murr actually did that. He had, you can see like I think it's Adventure Comics 489. Is that? I forget which issue it was. I think it was, or was it 389? One of those was like, he created a character called Distortion X. And they actually made him the villain, not the hero in this one piece. And it's down the bottom, it says Distortion X, created by Ed Murr, age 14, Poughkeepsie, New York, or something, or Hopewell Junction, New York, or something like that. Mm-hmm. So he'd been looking for that artwork because he wanted to buy as an adult, he always wanted to buy that original art. But Frank McLaughlin drew it. And he actually talked to Frank McLaughlin once, who said, I don't know where those pages are. They were stolen. So Ed was like, So just this week, he found one of the pages from an artist dealer. And he's buying it. Not the page with his name on it, but the page afterwards with his character Distortion X on it.
That's really cool.
Huh.
Kind of reminds me of the old Millie the Model stories where you would have people sending in outfits for her to wear, and it would be written on the box as submitted by Jennifer Love from wherever, New York.
Harlan Ellison, age 39. He sent some in too. Silver Fox, created by Harlan Ellison. That was always funny to see him in there. Curious, is the bullpen at Marvel different to DC? Well, nowadays, I don't think either has a bullpen. Especially post-COVID.
Yeah, they were similar at the time, because when I went in to interview at DC, it was kind of like the same vibe. A very similar layout when I went.
I worked at DC for 2 days and 20 minutes once.
Oh, okay.
The main difference between the Marvel and DC bullpen is what's his name? Hobson. The publisher?
Mike Hobson?
Mike Hobson, the publisher of Marvel Comics, believed in the myth of the Marvel Comics bullpen. I talked to Carl Potts about it once at a con a few years ago. And he was telling me that it never got done, but Mike Hobson, and Tom DeFalco wanted to write a book about if you want a fun workplace, it has to come from the top down, which makes sense. No, if your boss doesn't want a fun workplace, it's not going to be. So Mike Hobson, the myth of the Marvel bullpen was important to him. So he wanted the Marvel bullpen to be a fun place. And it was. I mean, there were a lot of, you have to picture a big room with, at its peak, 35 people in it, all creative, all allowed to talk all day. So it was a fun place. The DC bullpen was much more corporate. And as I discovered, it was during the first, I think it was during the first bankruptcy I worked there.
You're also comparing different eras, though, aren't you?
No, same. Marvel bankruptcy. Right after, it was during the Marvel bankruptcy in '96 that I worked at the DC bullpen. So it was the same exact era. DC had just started to digitize, and Marvel had just. The Marvel bullpen was still fun when you were there, Chris, but it slowly over the years stopped, got more and more.
I thought you were talking about when you worked at DC for like 2 days, like in the 2000s.
No, that was '96. I didn't work there in the 2000s.
What was the one? The guy who like left the thing out. You told the guy like
that was '96. That was not the 2000s.
96? Oh, I was it was 2006.
No. The only reason I was there was because of Marvel's bankruptcy. So, and they had no work for me for a week. Actually, more like 4 days. But like DC's bullpen, it wasn't a bad place, but Marvel's bullpen, we worked directly with the editors. the bullpen and the editors all worked. Like they needed something, they came over to us. If it was an emergency or something, they had to go through Virginia, and then they'd come to us. But we knew all the editors. We were friends with all the editors. We worked with them. DC's bullpen, you didn't do that. Everybody just kind of sat at their own, and it didn't have the same fun atmosphere because Mike Hobson wasn't there wanting the same fun atmosphere. But it was a big room they just had gotten computers there. It wasn't terrible or anything, but you didn't work. The editors were on another floor. You never saw them. You handed all your stuff to the traffic manager, the head of the bullpen, and he brought all the stuff to the editors, and everything went through him. So it was a completely different sort of atmosphere.
Yeah, but even when Mort Weisinger or Julie Schwartz retired, it was still the same thing. Guys like Carmine Infantino and Joe Orlando took over the publishing, even in the 70s.
Yeah.
And even they did not change the corporate atmosphere.
No. It was much more corporate. And I'm told that particular system in their bullpen, like I said, they told me this within the first day, was designed so that two specific people wouldn't have to talk to each other because they didn't like each other. Okay.
Okay. So when I went in there to interview, I was more talking in the sense of the layout of the place.
Oh, okay, the layout.
Like you had basically that's what I pictured was that. Oh, it's very similar to the Marvel bullpen where you had this open space.
Yeah, it was a little more close. It was more like the later Marvel bullpen. It was more when there was cubicles because there was kind of cubicles in the DC bullpen. Not quite cubicles; they're a little more open than that, but
they were a little more open. But they were like half cubicles, I guess you could say. That they blocked the person who was in front of you, kind of a thing. But there was an open kind of space.
I can't remember if they blocked the person in front of you, or there was like 3 desks in a row, and then like walls on the side, so you can see the person in front of you and to the side of you, but not over the next wall. That's my memory, but I could be off.
Yeah, because I only visit there like 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
In the actual bullpen itself. Most of the other times I've ever been up to DC was I usually didn't get past the door, because they would come out and give me my check. Right. Because when I was lettering for their CMX, I was technically working for California because that's where the office was for CMX, but I would go to the regular office to pick up my checks. So
I was told there were fewer people working at Marvel too.
I could see that.
Yeah. And from the stories Bunch tells me, it was much easier to steal at DC, and people were. Stealing original art, I mean.
Oh, okay.
Because there was no stories about stealing original art at Marvel that I know, besides a couple of aberrational ones, like that one guy who was coming in after work and
during the time I was there, and that was the one big break-in that I teamed up with the security guy. I had my Marvel team up, and we figured out who it was and was able to catch him because going through security cameras and stuff like that.
Right, that's the only story, and he was really an outsider too. He wasn't in the office.
He was an outsider. Yeah, technically he was inside job, but not. He came from outside. He was a freelancer, so you have that type of thing where he was in there doing it. And again, it's one of those things where it's like obviously pissed me off, but when it was found out, then I would hear stories of people going, "Yeah, he did that at DC too," and it's like, why didn't anyone tell me this beforehand? No. It's like one of those things like, oh yeah, he did that at Valiant as well. And it's like
I would hear stories from Bunch about people who would see some original art they liked, make stats of the original art, paste them down to board and hand those into wherever the original art goes, and then walk off with the art. There was none of that going on at Marvel.
No, the only thing that I heard story-wise was that one of the people in the upstairs floors, finance and stuff like that, had an original piece of artwork hanging in their office that they were given.
Right.
They were given that piece of artwork, but someone came by, saw it, made a copy of it, and replaced it. It didn't tell anyone. And they
put the copy in the frame.
Yeah.
Ah,
That's the story I was told, that and the person who has the artwork didn't realize that the original was taken out, because again, it's one of those things that if you're not working directly with the artwork, you're not going to know what's
right. You're not looking at it.
You're
You're
not
just
looking at it.
glancing at it. Everything seems okay. You move on with your day. It's a picture on the wall. It's not something in your hand. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't heard that one.
Yeah.
Let's see, another comic I got this week. Another good one, Saga, issue 59.
Would you like to rephrase that?
I don't have much to say about Saga. It's a solid comic. More stuff happened this issue. I like it. It's a solid B every issue, but it's not deep. It's just a good, solid comic. I like the artwork. The writing's good. It's a saga. You just read it piece by piece. You live in life with these crazy people in outer space.
I gave up on it by page 5 of the first issue.
I like it. Like I said, I'm not going to tell anybody. I'm not telling anybody it's a must read, though. It's a lot more people like it a lot more than me. Like I said, there's 11 million copies of the trades out there. That is crazy.
Sure, I gave mine away at our monthly comics dinner, and well, I don't like this. Somebody else will.
Yeah, I've said a lot. I enjoy it. Like I said, it's not my fit. To me, it's a B. But a lot of people like it as an A, so that's okay with me. An interesting issue of Aerosmith, pardon me. Behind Enemy Lines, number 5, and this is 6 is going to be the end of part 1, and then there's another 6. Some really nice artwork in here, and we get a history of the magic stuff. In this, we get because like this takes place in World War I, in a world where there's magic, and now in this issue we get a history as to why there's magic in this world and the deals they made with magic users, and there's some nice fantasy magical art going on, and there's we get to see the home of the rock trolls, and that's nicely visualized too. Let's see, where is that? Oh, there's their big door. Their magical door. Whoops, but a good issue. I really enjoyed. I'm not always a backstory guy, but I enjoyed the backstory in this. Oh, and this was interesting to me too. I saw the ad in here. This was a comic I liked, I think, in the 80s. John Arcudi and Dale Eaglesham, The Creep. It used to appear in the first volume of Dark Horse number 1. I mean, the Dark Horse Presents, Volume 1. And there were just little stories about this guy's, he's just a PI, but he looks ugly. So they call him the Creep. And I forget what he has that makes him look monstrous. So it's a PI story where instead of the PI being handsome and charming, the PI is a creep. And I think it's 4 long unavailable tales brought to life in this new remastered edition. So I guess it's some kind of collection of the Creep. I would recommend this. I'm going to see if I can track it down. When is it out? July, from Image. But I remember, I haven't read this in a long time, but I remember this was one of the standouts in Dark Horse Presents for me.
I vaguely remember, and then when you said the name, I actually flashed to like an Airboy comic, but I think that creature was called the Heap.
The Heap, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
That was the first swamp monster in comics from the 40s, I think, that they brought back. But a good issue of
Aerosmith. Now public domain.
Yeah, he might be.
Wow.
The Heap. You can get a list of public domain comic book characters. There's some website. I have it bookmarked somewhere.
I wouldn't trust those lists completely.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
A few of those characters are pretty wishful thinking.
Yeah.
And I think they base it on the fact that there were no copyright renewals on some 1960 Bluebill stories.
Right.
I don't think they would apply in 1960 because the copyright laws had been reformed since then, and 28 years after publication would apply, since the copyright laws were amended again 18 years later. Every Bluebill story published by Charlton featuring Ted Cord is still registered. None of them are in the public domain.
And Charlton kind of got cut up, and
Yes.
the IP bought by different people. I know because Mort Todd has been doing some Charlton stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He actually bought a lot of the Charlton stats. But someone else bought some Canadian guy who's kind of disappeared, bought most of Charlton's IP. Well, I know because Mort has tried to track it down.
Yeah, whatever IP they're thinking of, since the interesting characters were bought out by DC.
Yeah.
What do they have left?
I don't know. But whatever they have left, this Canadian guy bought. Because I don't think I don't think Mort can use all his stats to republish stuff because he doesn't necessarily have the publishing rights to all of it. But some of the stuff in the public domain, he does.
As the superheroes were also to DC. We eventually sold off Peter Cannon back to Pete Morisi. Of the non-superheroes, DC kept Sarge Steel. So there may be some sort of Western characters that
you check out. He runs a Charlton page on Facebook. You can actually see. I'll find out.
And Sam Glansman's war stories he retained the copyright because they appeared in other places.
I was wondering how that Sam Glansman book was made. I was like, wow, because there's a lot of stuff from Marvel, DC, and other places. I think he did it for Epic. The Sam Glansman. What is the name of that ship he was on? I can't remember. It's in the other room. Whatever the name of the ship he was on, he was publishing stories of it in the back of DC War Comics, and then I think he continued the stories in some Epic comics in the late '80s. I forget which ones, and it all came out in this giant collection from another publisher. And I'm like, did they license that stuff from DC? They must have. Because it was in like 1970s DC War Comics. Who else is going to reprint? I mean, I'm sure DC said, yeah, sure, reprint it. We're never going to.
Of course, they could say, no, we don't let you reprint. We don't want this to appear anywhere else.
That's why Marvel destroyed their romance comic stats from the 50s. Did you ever? I stumbled on that one day, Wilson, at Marvel when they were on 40th Street. That's when Ike was cleaning out the warehouses in his continuing drive to clean out and make money from Marvel stuff. And one day I was walking by. Matter of fact, where was he? He might have been in the lettering room. That wasn't the lettering room at the time. I can't remember. There was an intern there using a paper cutter on stats. And I remember
it was. I remember it was doing it to the film too.
Yeah, and it was the Marvel romance stuff from the 50s. That Ike and who was the publisher again?
Mike Hobson.
No.
By that time it wouldn't be Mike Hobson.
It was that crazy guy, Jemis, Bill Jemis. Bill Jemis and Ike decided they wanted that stuff destroyed because it was bad for Marvel's image and they were never going to print it again. So the kid, I should have taken this. The kid was like, "Do you want any?" I should have taken them, but I was like, what am I going to do with them?
Reprint them.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there was someone who had bought romance.
Well, they were right though. Imagine if those stats were still around.
Oh, Marvel would be ruined.
Yeah, they'd be destroyed.
Oh yeah, completely. But there was someone who bought. There was a person who had bought 50s romance books and reprinted them with new text.
Oh, I've seen those.
But made them funny and stuff like that,
Right,
and then used
right.
those images to make shirts and all types of things. You know,
funny is generous.
True.
I forget the name of them. I bought one or two of them. It was I've yet people have been doing that with other in public domain old comic books too. I've yet to read one of them that's funny.
Mm.
I was like, Bunch needs to be doing these, not whoever these people are.
Yeah.
People think they're funny.
Right.
Yeah, Guandana Land would probably love to have some of those stats.
Yeah.
Do you guys know Guandana Land?
What was that?
The Wilson and Chris, do you know Guandana Land?
I don't believe so.
Okay, Guandana Land is a guy. He uses a pseudonym on the internet because he's not entirely sure that everything that he's publishing is public domain. But he runs a line of comics hardcovers that are mostly in the public domain, and he puts out comics on demand. They're not cheap, but they're pretty complete, and I think they're black and white. But yeah, if you want some of those stories, you can have them.
Yeah, that. By the way, have Wilson and Chris, have you seen Bunch's Bathroom Companion? Remember the movie reviews he used to do?
Oh yeah,
I have one of them. I still have one of them, not a complete one.
Years ago, I scanned and made a PDF out of all of them. If you want a PDF copy, I'll post a link for you. I'll post it on the COC. I think I've got it on Dropbox somewhere. But yeah, that's good stuff.
Yeah, definitely some good stuff. I remember at one point, this is early Facebook, where I had asked him if he ever wanted to put that together, kind of a thing, and make, this is during the time that I was freelancing for every artist, trying to basically talk them into self-publishing little books to sell at conventions, because I could put the books together, and I had a connection at that time with someone at like a Kinko's to make trade paperbacks on the cheap, basically, to sell at cons and stuff like that. And at the time, he was like, he had no technology to be able to scan them in, let alone, even make them a little better. Meaning,
I've
new lettering and stuff like that.
I have good scans of all the photocopies. So. But yeah, really
this
could
was like years before that.
Right. Let's see another comic I got. Cameo appearance. Usagi, Lone Goat and Kid, number 5 of 6. And it's funny that they call this Lone Goat and Kid, but this isn't a continuing story, because this is the reprint Usagi book, and most of them were kind of done in ones. Though the story, he moved on to the next town, the next issue or something. But in this issue 5, we finally get the character in here tells him about Lone Goat and Kid. So there's like 2 panels with Lone Goat and Kid in it. And I'm like, ooh, cameo appearance. First Lone Goat and Kid cameo. That's another big collector thing. First true appearance and first cameo appearance. But it was a really good issue about this general who's dying and who's kind of running this town, and he wants to die honorably, so he wants Usagi to kill him, but Usagi won't. But good story. But this the Mouse Guard guy, David Peterson, has been doing all the covers for this in his style. And I have to say, they gave us next issue's cover at the back, and I just really liked this cover. It actually worked as a pan. This is next issue's cover, but it works as a panel and the story too. And I just think he he really caught a look in Lone Goat's eye that made me go, wow. He did a nice job with that. All the leaves blowing, all the motion in there, with the lone goat just staring at you. I was like, wow, he did a nice job on that one. Like, and it actually worked in context of the story, where the story kind of wound down with this peaceful thing, then it ended, and then next lone goat and kid. It's just like, whoa, that's intense. Anyone familiar with Star-Lord UK comic that folded into 2000 AD? Strontium Dog was cool. I know Strontium Dog.
Yeah, Star-Lord was a science fiction magazine that IPC put out a couple of years before they published 2000 AD. 2000 AD became more famous faster. I am familiar with some of the other comics that were in there. Let me check some because
it was Star-Lord, wasn't it?
Star-Lord.
Oh, okay.
Star-Lord.
Yeah.
Star-Log was different.
Yeah,
Star-Lord.
Because a few of these were published in Spain in CMOC Volume 1.
Oh, I found the Art of Usagi Jimbo comic in the dollar bin on Wednesday. Late 90s and up front. It's a long intro on how he makes an issue. Best buck I ever spent. Some YouTuber, I forget who it was, actually sent me those. I'll have to check my video. Years and years ago, he ran into him and in a dollar bin. He just messaged me. He's like, "You got these too?" I'm like, "No, I've never even heard of those." There's 2 volumes of the Art of Usagi Jimbo that are comic size. So he sent me both of them. I was like, "Oh, cool,
nice."
What else was in Star-Lord?
I know there was a couple of other science fiction stories which I knew about them because they were published in Spain in CMOC. And now I can go to Tebeosfera to check because Tebeosfera seems to be down.
Chris Geruso alert. Chris Geruso alert.
Oh.
It's Image Anthology, Volume 2, where we get, where is it? A 3-page G-Man story. G-Man exterminate all humans. Where we get a multiverse story. In 3 pages
cool.
from Chris.
Multiverses are hot right now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I'd just like to point out that in the... I was like, what's going on here? I bet it's Chris's fault. There we go. There's a biographies page, and Chris has got the shortest biography. Well, it might be a contest between W. Maxwell Prince and Chris Geruso. They both have 3-line biographies. They're the only ones in here with 3-line biographies. Everybody else has got 5, 6, 10, 12 lines. All we get is Chris Geruso is the artist behind G-Man at Image Comics, the Mini Marvels at Marvel Comics, and the artist of Hashtag Danger at Ahoy Comics. We get no insight into who Chris Geruso is.
It sounds like those other artists took all the space.
Yeah.
And left nothing for Chris.
I'm guessing they asked him to send a bio in, and he never did.
Maybe if you had been in charge of the bios page, it would have turned out different.
It would have been. It would have.
You would have directed me to do something different.
Dean Haspiel is an Emmy and Ringo award-winning creator of the Red Hook at Image.
Sorry, I haven't won any awards.
He illustrated for HBO's Bored to Death, is a Yadu Fellow, a playwright, and helped pioneer personal webcomics.
You're just mad at me for not being more successful.
Dino has written, drawn, and collaborated on many Harvey Picar's American Splendor and The Quitter.
Yeah,
Jonathan
that's a better bio than mine. I give you that. You got me, Jared.
I want to see you pump up that bio next time.
You know what? I'll try to be more successful.
Yeah.
I should have mentioned Officer Clawson.
You should have.
But it's not.
Chris G. Russo is an artist who sits in his studio all day, every day, and doesn't get to do anything but draw Officer Clawson. But I read this just how Paulo said to read it last time I brought this up. I read a story or two, I put it down. I came back, I read a story or two, I put it down. I liked it much better than the first issue, which I didn't necessarily read all in one sitting, but I read and then we but it read a lot nicer, kind of putting it down between, I take a break, read 6-8 pages, 2 stories.
Read it nice.
Yeah. It was good. That way I could concentrate on each little tale.
Read it nice.
But it was good stuff. We got a Dean Haspiel single page in the back where he waxes poetic, and he gives us his Billy Dogma is all about waxing poetic and spouting philosophy. So there was more of that.
Did not enjoy my story, by the way, because you didn't say anything about it.
I don't want to ruin your multiverse jokes.
Chris has a story. Here's the title. Now let's make fun of his biography.
Now go read it. You can see grown-up G-Man and little kid G-Man and how they interact. And do they change the timeline or do they not change the timeline? You'll have to see.
Oh, that's always the threat that looms upon a multiverse story.
It depends on what you believe.
Finally found that other story I knew from Star-Lord, from the UK Star-Lord magazine. It was called Mind Wars. It had art. It had art by Jesus Redondo, who appeared a few times. I think he was published in Warren, but he also appeared in Savage Sword of Conan.
Okay.
There were a bunch of Spanish artists working for UK magazines back then. I think that when the Riego Ediciones put out the first volume of CMOC, those were the same guys that ended up packaging stuff for Warren, like Comics International and 1984. And they published these because the Spanish artists were working for the UK and the French market. So they put out Strontium Dog because it had Carlos Ezquerra artwork. They put out Mind Wars because it had Jesus Redondo artwork. And they also had a couple of interesting series which were published in France on Beef Gadget. One was the Earth Robinsons. The art was by Alfonso Font, who is now much better known for his more personal, would be considered indie in the United States work. And the other one was by Westcar, which this one was more of a cheesecake soft porn. And both of these series were written by Roger Lecureau, who is more famous for having created the French barbarian Rahan, who had a couple of animated series made of the character. And Rahan was basically the only adventure series that was put out on Beef Gadget.
And also there's in the Image Comics, there's an Ice Cream Man story for you Ice Cream Man fans out there. One of those
semiotics.
It's a pretty trippy story too. Pretty trippy.
It better be. Nobody thinks about semiotics if they unless they're on drugs.
Yeah, I think there was some. Here we go. In semiotic theory, the study of signs and symbols. They give you a little. It's called a signoid. So they give you the definition of semiotics too, just in case you don't know. The study of signs and symbols. But good issue. Like I said, I think reading it with time in between stories really helped me enjoy. There were so many enjoyable comics this week. It's amazing that I can get 13 comics, and there were at least half of them I'll give A's to. There was just, if not more, there were just that many good comics in my. I guess it's not that much of a surprise because I wasn't taking any chances. It was all stuff from my pull list. And then we've got, speaking of Dean Haspiel.
Before you start on that one, I'm going to step away for a minute.
Oh, you got another meeting?
Maybe. I got to actually check. It might be being canceled, but I want to double check. So I might actually be back in like 5 minutes.
All right. This is a nice Dean Haspiel Fox story. He did a couple of miniseries with Mark Waid doing the Fox, who is an Archie superhero guy. So they wanted him to do another Fox story, and it's really about the Fox, his wife, and it's just kind of a cool little Archie story. And then we also get I think there's a second story. There's a story. Who does this one? Vito DeSalante is the story, and line art by Richard Ortiz. So there's a second little story in here. Then in the back, we get a reprint of an Alex Toth Fox story from the Black Hood #2 in 1983. And the Fox kind of has even in this 1983 one, kind of has a fun, light slapstick feel to it. So if you want to see some Alex Toth artwork. Do I have to say this? I don't think this was my favorite Alex Toth artwork, but there was some nice stuff in it. But I actually went to college with Dean Haspiel. And then, of course, knew him from the comics world after that. Mm-hmm. But to tell you how small the comics world is, Dean Haspiel, his best friend growing up was Larry O'Neill, who was Denny O'Neill's son, and their babysitter was Flo Steinberg. So
that is just amazing. I'd love to talk to them to ask them just about Flo Steinberg.
Yeah. I'm not a sweet old woman. That was did I ever tell you that quote?
Well, she couldn't be if she had to put up with Stan Lee.
This was 40th Street at Marvel. Mm-hmm. And Flo, like a 387 Marvel, she was kind of off the side of the bullpen. And she used to wear these earpieces to make with white noise in them so she could proofread, since she was a proofreader then. And sometimes we'd get too loud because Mike Hobson would, want this place to be fun. But sometimes we would that place would get way too loud on occasion, the bullpen. She'd be, oh my goodness. So now in 40th Street, they gave her own office sort of way off down the end somewhere. So there was no noise for her. And the bullpen was much smaller, and we were in cubicles. And we were on the other end. So she, she sometimes would, we weren't as close by, and she wanted someone to talk to. She had to walk down the hall. And occasionally she'd walk down the hall just to vent for a minute and then go back. And so one time I'm sitting there doing whatever I'm doing. And all of a sudden I see Flo coming down the hall, and she's got a look on her face. I'm like, uh-oh, what? She's going to vent. And all of a sudden she comes over to me and she looks at me and she goes, why do people keep saying I'm a sweet old woman? I am not a sweet old woman. And turns around and walks away. I was just like, all right.
I'll leave you.
That's Flo Steinberg, Flo Steinberg. She was Stan Lee's Gal Friday in the 60s. She was the one who used to answer the mail and stuff. And then she came back in the early 90s to work at Marvel as a proofreader. And you can find her also in one of the early issues of What If the original Marvel bullpen became the Fantastic Four. They made Flo Steinberg the Invisible Woman.
Mm-hmm. nowadays, and if Martin Goodman had any respect for working people, she would have been considered executive secretary.
Yeah. She also, like, a lot of, like, I think Walter Simonson has a story, and other people have a story that they wrote as kids. They wrote into Marvel in like 1966, 1967, and got a letter back from Flo. She was the one who would correspond with the fans.
Not a sweet old woman, but she corresponded with the fans.
She was not a sweet. She was a 60 counterculture person.
Yeah.
She really was.
She had her own publishing venture for a while.
Right. She had Big Apple Comics was her. Mm-hmm. I think she dated Wally Wood in the 60s.
Now, that's an interesting book to write about.
I had heard, somebody had told me that, but I don't know how. She never did. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure if somebody could write that book now. I'm sure all the guilty parties who were aware of it would now be dead or pretty close to it.
Yeah. But she may have looked like a sweet old woman, but she wasn't. I mean, she was nice. Mm-hmm. And she had this high-pitched voice that sounded sweet. But, you know, she could tell you to get the hell out of there and leave her alone, too. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, she wouldn't let anybody visit her in the hospital when she was dying. She didn't want to see anybody. There were people like Julio was close with her and wanted to go see her. She said no.
Okay.
She was like, all right. Let's see, another comic I got this week, Rogue Sun. This is another of the Radiant Black comics, but this one is ongoing. This is a solid superhero comic. Again, I'd give this one a B. Teenage, lots of pathos in it.
All right,
teenage
I found the thing I was looking for.
Let's see, what's he showing us? Oh, there's Flo. Back when she was a brunette. Send the little goblin in, Flo. She had gray hair when we knew her. But solid superhero comic. Guy inherits his father's superhero costume, his estranged father. That's important. And his estranged father is part of the AI of the suit now, and he's really annoyed that his absentee father is teaching him how to be a superhero. And his half-brother and sister who are younger, who are trying to scheming against him because they don't believe he deserves the costume. Meanwhile, villains are attacking him. He's supposed to be protecting the world. Solid superhero stuff. Won't change the world, but a solid B. I think I liked Radiant Red a little bit better this issue, though. To compare the two Radiant Black comics. Oh, there was one other thing. Let me see here. I wrote down in my notebook. Oh, that's right. Have you ever read a comic and then go, have I read this one before? I'm not sure if I have. I read digitally on Hoopla, Not My Bag by Sina Grace. And the whole time I'm reading it, I'm going, have I read this before? It seemed familiar, but not familiar enough that I knew I read it. And I think I would have known if I read. It's about, do you know who Sina Grace is?
Yes, is more famous for being the one who turned Iceman into a 1980s gay stereotype.
Yes. I think this was before then. Because it was his own stuff still. And this was about him working in retail, but not retail as I think of it. When I think someone's working in retail, I think, they're working in any retail store, working the cash register, doing whatever. He was actually working in high-end fashion retail, where he was working on commission. So he went through, like they were guaranteed like $10 an hour, but then they had to sell like $500 worth of items in a day, and after that they got 6% commission on everything they sold. Blah blah. But this was like high-end stuff too, and it was all about him working there while he was. It really wasn't about him trying to be a cartoonist. It was about him trying to succeed in this retail job. But everybody was backstabbing, and his managers weren't looking out for him. They were looking out to get him, and this and that. And it was an interesting little look at this sort of high-end retail job. But eventually he quit. There's the spoiler for you, but that's why we know his name, and he's been doing graphic novels and whatever since then. Turning Iceman into a gay 80s stereotype. He's gay himself too, so that's why he's allowed to.
Right. I remember conversations 20 years ago on whether Iceman was gay, and it was kind of based on two things. One was there are a couple of issues of the Uncanny X-Men where the White Queen takes over Iceman's body, and she manages to use his powers a lot better than he ever did, because he doesn't feel limited by
because he's gay.
No, yeah, and Scott Lobdell wrote in a bit where Emma Frost says that he should go into interior decorating. The other thing that people mention, which is not the scene from X-Men #1 when he's not interested in Jean Grey, but it's the fact there was he was trying to have a relationship with Cloud on the New Defenders, and Cloud. At the time, they didn't know who Cloud was, and she was an amnesiac girl. She could turn into a cloud. She could do things clouds did, like raining and throwing thunderbolts. But she wasn't very interested in Bobby. She was more interested in Moondragon. Now, Moondragon had not come out yet either, although it does make sense that she's gay because previous experiences she had with trying to have a relationship with men, she found it very mechanistic. You'll remember that she wanted to be the Celestial Madonna back in the 70s Avengers.
Oh yeah,
but that was a power grab. So the idea would be that. So the idea here was that Cloud, in girl form, reciprocated Moondragon's sexual interests, and when she finally started opening up to the idea of dating Bobby Drake, he then shows up with the body of a man, and that scene from the 80s is what made an opening for the concept that Iceman could actually be gay.
Okay.
But that's an intelligent conversation that we had online 20 years ago. And how Sina Grace handled it, absolutely no finesse.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't read any of that. But I did read another of my comics this week, Ice Cream Man, issue 30. Wow, they're up to 30 already. Another crazy horror issue. This one is all about testing drugs. Our initial scene is in a pharmaceutical drug testing, where they're checking out doses of this drug that give you mild hallucinations. And they're not very ethical in their testing, because the one guy they told, they told on the QT that he really had a placebo. They actually gave extra to. But this being the Ice Cream Man, it just keeps getting weirder and weirder. And you find out that the doctor who is testing these two guys on drugs. The pharmaceutical company is also testing on him. So it keeps going back in layers to who's testing on who. And it's just so weird. The Ice Cream Man is just such a weird book. I love it. And there's good visuals of the hallucinations. There's this strange drooling spider, and it's just and it's funny. I figured out a few issues ago what makes the Ice Cream Man artist, what's his name here? Martin Morazzo. What makes he's got an accent over the I in Martin, so it's not Martin. What makes his art so disturbing and weird too is he draws teeth on everybody. It's like most comic book characters don't have individual teeth. He is forever drawing for individual teeth. So it's like everybody's got this weird, creepy grin. And it's the teeth. I realized at one point it's the teeth that make the grin so creepy. Because you don't draw teeth. They're tiny little teeth. It looks creepy in general.
I believe it was Eric Larson who said, in order to make a creature look like a monster, is draw every one of the teeth in. Don't put it on a superhero. Right.
And I didn't realize that till because these are all just normal people he's drawing, but he's drawing teeth on all of them, so they look like monsters sometimes. That brings me of the one of the art lessons John Romita gave me one day. He said, don't pay too much attention to ears. Don't try and draw them too. It's like people don't like ears. If you spend too much time drawing them, they won't like it. I was like, it's a solid bit of advice. Don't spend too much time on ears. No one likes them. I think he was right. And my worst comic of the week with the best cover is Cerebus in Hell parodying the Alf cover of Alf Annual number 2.
Robert Redford?
Robert Redford?
Alf number 1.
Safety Seal.
Safety Seal. Great. And I know this cover must be popular because he actually numbers each comic now. So this is, so you know the print run. This is copy number 1300 out of 2379. And 2,379 is actually hot. He's been averaging around 1,700 copies. But when there's a good cover that people like, I notice the number goes up by like 500 copies. I think some of them he's peaked out at around 3,000. And in case you don't know what this is, it's Dave Sim can't draw anymore, so he does these cut and paste comic strips. So each page is a comic strip. I think you can find them on the web too.
Why can't he draw anymore?
He's got nerve damage in his wrist that he's not been able to find a medical solution to. But I got to say, this was the worst issue, the previous worst issue, because it's hit or miss. It's comic strips. He did one, and usually there's a theme to an issue. He did an issue all about Canadian politics. As you might imagine, that issue didn't really hit home with me because I had no idea what he was talking about half the time. But in this issue, he does, it's more political than his normal stuff too, but because the name of it is Cerebus in Hell, and the whole idea is at the end of the 300 issue Cerebus story, he dies and goes to hell. And and now Virgil and Dante, the guy who wrote Dante's Inferno, and Virgil, who was the character in Dante's Inferno that guided him through hell, are now guiding us through Cerebus in Hell. So they comment on stuff. Cerebus comments on stuff. There's various versions of Cerebus, whatever he does for the joke. But this one stars Satan. Like, we actually get Satan in this one. And I think he's trying to make jokes about Black Lives Matters and other stuff, but it's coming out of Satan's mouth. And I'm like, is he trying to be the devil's advocate with the? It just wasn't funny. And I'm just like, any criticisms you've ever heard about about social issues, he regurgitates in this issue. Nothing insightful, nothing funny. And I was just like, oh my God, this is. I'm like, are these supposed to be jokes? I think they're supposed to be jokes, but like, it was just a terrible, great cover though. Love this cover. One of my favorite Cerebus in Hell covers, but the inside just didn't cut it. But like, I expect that from Cerebus in Hell, with the various themes and the fact that they're all comic strips and its humor. It's got to be hit or miss. Hit or miss. That is not going to be a forever key.
So I attempted to read a comic book this week.
All right. You attempted. You didn't make it.
I attempted. No, I didn't make it because I really just scammed through it. Now I have 3 short boxes of books that I was given a while back that I wasn't sure what I was going to do with them. And they're books from 2015.
Mm-hmm.
So what I grabbed this one is because I decided, well, I'm not going to do anything with these books. I might as well sell them. So as you know, I have an eBay page,
right?
An eBay store, but I just joined Hip Comics. They're another auction site. They had invited me to join, and so I went ahead and joined. And they have an interesting setup where once you take a photo, once you upload the photo, it starts putting the information automatically for you.
Uh-huh.
And to me, you made it easier for me. I'm going to use this tool. So I took books out and I'm going through them. I'm going through the DC stuff. And so I hit a chunk of Wonder Woman. And the title was called Sensational Comics Featuring Wonder Woman. Mm-hmm. I haven't gone through those yet, but in the stack was Wonder Woman 77, which is the Linda Carter Wonder Woman. And I know that it's edited by Jim Chadwick, who was my editor when I worked at for DC when I led books there. So I figured I'll check it out. So the artwork's fine. It's good. What I found interesting is the first story is the origin of Cheetah.
Mm-hmm.
And it reads, now I don't recall the origin of Cheetah in the comic books. Originally, I only know Cheetah really from the cartoon.
Okay.
But the story is kind of similar to what they eventually did for the second movie, in the sense of the Cheetah origin, where she works for a museum. Her exhibit that apparently she's been working on for years is getting bumped for a Wonder Woman exhibit. So she is upset and somehow finds a relic that has magic, kind of like in the movie, but this time it's a knife that she somehow cuts herself with and becomes the Cheetah. So it's almost kind of like a werewolf type of thing, because she's going around attacking people and they start turning into cheetah people. So I found it interesting. And it's like, basically, I don't know if they based her designs on a known actress like they did with the Batman 66 storyline, where Two-Face is really based on William Shatner. Because they figured, back then, maybe William Shatner would have been hired to play Two-Face. It's kind of basically what they did. And when they did the animated movie, they had William Shatner voicing Two-Face. So very similar to that. The artist on here, I don't know the name because there's 2 stories in here, but the likenesses are there. But I haven't sat down and read the second story, which they're introducing a new villainess in it as well, which she is, I think, fire and ice together. And visually, it looks good. I can't tell you anything about the story because I didn't really finish reading it, but it was one that I picked up late last night and started to read. And then there's an appearance of the Atomic Knights, which I believe are an old DC.
Let me get you solo here so we can see.
Okay.
There you go. Ah.
Because I know that logo looks familiar, so they must have been a storyline already called that. Because, DC is so old, they've been using, or they recycle characters from, other companies and what have you. So, but again, the artwork's pretty good. It looks like Linda Carter.
Yeah. They're really going for some photography look with that, I got to say.
Yeah, they definitely are. And again, it was like one of those things where the cover made me pick up the book to look at it, and it's like, maybe I'll read it.
Who's doing the art on it?
Let's see. The first story, there are two artists credited, Drew Johnson and Richard Orbitz.
Okay. Do you guys know Russ Braun?
No.
Braun. He's an artist. He's done work for DC, I know, and other places. He's been good artist. I think he's done some. He used to do stuff for Vertigo in the 90s. But if you follow him on like Instagram, he sometimes does these drawings, or Facebook. He sometimes does these drawings of like they're kind of what if drawing, and he draws pretty realistically too. He does these sort of realistic pencil drawings of Spider-Man villains as if they showed up on that 70s Spider-Man show, except he casts real actors as them and actresses.
Oh, okay.
So they look really cool, and he designs the costume as if they were made well for the 70s Spider-Man show.
Okay.
And I got to say, he does some nice stuff with that. Look, Russbraun, Russ Braun.
What have to check him out. Because I enjoy. Cool. Oh, you know what? I have seen his artwork before.
Yeah, he's been around for a while, and he used to hang out sometimes with the guys. He hangs out with Bunch a lot, I think.
Okay.
Or he used to. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. I mean, again, going back, I enjoyed it for what it was as a kid. That's like, oh, it's Spider-Man. But never a villain to fight. Not even just a fat guy to play the Kingpin. That just, oh.
Sorry, but I tried the recent work by Sims. No, thank you. I don't blame you. It's hit or miss. And that issue was, as much as I like that, I find that cover funny. That issue was unreadable. So if you pick up that issue, whew, it was terrible. And let's see, the last thing I got for the week was another one of these graphic novel-sized Aftershock one-shots. Where is it here? Called Spectro. Juan Doe's Spectro. I really like this cover. Unfortunately, the cover was the best thing about it.
Oh, okay.
Not that it was terrible, but Juan Doe has got to be a pen name. There's no one really named Juan Doe, right?
No.
Calrissian.
But there's 4 individual stories, weird sci-fi horror individual stories. And the first one was just so strange. It was about this council of people who all represented the planet and they've represented the planets for thousands of years, and now they're going to have to kick Pluto out. And it was just like, it wasn't really a story. It didn't make it. It was just like, okay, that's a weird little trippy thing, but could you give me a story? It was nicely visualized. Yeah. Love this cover. I mean, the cover is just terrific. It is super cool. The second story I liked a lot more, about this rich guy in the future who decided he wanted to climb the tallest mountain on Mars. I enjoyed that story. Let's see, what's the next story? Oh, the next story was about, once again, it wasn't really a story. And what was strange about this one was how dark it was. This is a story about like a spaceship in the future, a space station in the future. And the one thing I have to say, whenever someone visualizes a space station, like whether it's 2001 A Space Odyssey or Star Trek, they're always well lit. And this one, it was just like they were in the darkness all the time. And I'm just like, why is the space station dark? That seems weird. And it was a story about, we've taken over this space station and now we're gonna go back to Earth and conquer everyone. And the woman was like, no, you're not. I'm gonna blow up the whole space station first. You know, the story you've read 1,000 times, where somebody sacrifices themselves to stop the alien invasion. Is like, it's like the story Stan Lee was writing in those horror books. I use that term, those mystery books in the late 50s. I was just kind of like, But the middle story was the best, I have to say. And this cover is top notch. I just love this cover. So buy it knowing the cover is the best thing, but the cover is really cool.
The cover, when you first showed that cover, I first thought that might have been based on that. There's a strong woman character who, when she powers up, she turns into a skeleton face. I don't recall the name of it, though, but it's
Phantoma.
Phantoma. There we go. I could not remember the name at the time, so I thought it might have been something related to that.
Where's Phantoma from? I know that name and I can picture it, but I don't know.
I don't know any of the history from it. It's like one of those characters that I've always seen, but I've never really got to deep dive into her information because I don't know if she was a indie character from back in the day that stayed around, or if she was a big name character at her time.
Steve Paulo.
She's from the 1930s.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. She's a pulp hero then.
She already appeared in comics. She was designed by Fletcher Hanks.
Oh, she was a Fletcher Hanks one. Oh, that's why I just read her stuff, probably. I was just reading his stuff. Oh, okay. Nah.
Wow, from the 30s.
Fletcher Hanks.
Fletcher Hanks, the craziest artist in the Golden Age.
Yeah. Some good stuff, but like I said, when I finally read those Fletcher Hanks books, he's really talented too. Because I'd heard that he was one of those. You think that when people say, "Oh, you have to read this crazy Golden Age stuff," that it's kind of like so bad it's good stuff, but his stuff was actually good but crazy. I have those books, the Fletcher Hanks ones. That was good stuff.
Yeah, the thing is, people have notions of what Golden Age comics are supposed to be like.
Yeah.
And Fletcher Hanks was so out there.
Yeah. His stuff was nuts. Crazy alien invasion stories.
And they were very trippy. I mean, they were like conquering aliens, flying in, riding on the top of flying crocodiles.
Yeah. And just anything could happen story-wise. All of a sudden you get a weird plot twist and everything changes, and all within like 8 pages. It was really good stuff.
Yeah, they
would only hire him for fill-in stories. And what was what was his life story? Did he end up murdering someone or something? It was some crazy thing where I can't remember. He had some crazy thing happen to him either before his comics career or after. And then his son, who never even knew him, they interviewed in the book, and he was like, "Damn, I didn't know my father did this stuff." Or did he? No, he didn't murder. I think he abused his wife and son. That's why they didn't know him, because they got the hell out of there because he was nuts. The whole story's in the book. There's 2 Fletcher Hanks collections. I forget the name of them. I Will Destroy All Your Earth or something like that. But they actually interview his son in the books, and he's like, "Wow."
Crazy.
I dated a woman a few years ago with the tattoo of the skull woman from the Fletcher Hanks books. Oh, man. Did it scare you off? You're like, whoo, a Fletcher Hanks fan. Because I think I first read his stuff in that there's like an anthology hardcover of like weird comics that no one's ever heard of from I can't remember the name of it. But that's where I first saw Fletcher Hanks, but then they put out those 2 books of his own stuff.
Was it the Legion of Regrettable Supervillains?
Cartoonist Kayfabe did a video a few months ago on Fletcher Hanks. I've seen some of his stuff, but definitely want to check more out. Yeah. It's readable. I mean, it's good. It's good readable stuff. Unlike a lot of weird stuff from the Golden Age that's unreadable, that's good readable stuff, even though it's nuts. It's more readable than Whisper. That was did you ever read the book Whisper?
I have not.
An indie book. It was one I collected back then. I obviously came out in like the early 80s and went through the 80s, and I have like all the issues of it. I enjoyed it as it was coming out, but I tried to reread it a few years ago and made it through 1, maybe 2 issues. I was like, oh my God, I can't take this.
I find it hard reading books like I try to, because I have I have hardcovers of some of the old newspaper strips and books like that, or like Crazy Cat, and I love looking at the artwork.
Oh,
I can't read it.
I'm with you. I love the artwork, but I just don't get Crazy Cat reading it.
I remember even being a kid in junior high. Or actually, it might even been before junior high. I think I'm probably in the 5th grade. And this is when I was in New Rochelle. So in the library, they had a whole bunch of various old comic strips in these big books. And I would get to the Crazy Cat stuff and just study and look at the artwork, but not know what was going on.
Yeah.
So it was like, I enjoyed it, but could never figure out what was happening.
Tit Goblin was impressed with the Fatima cartoon. It was next to a SpongeBob and fit in surprisingly well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a few Crazy Cat books, and every now and then I just sit with them and read them and try to get into them. But I said I love the drawing. I like some of the pen, but I just don't always get. I don't get the love for it that other people had, and I wish I did. Because that's one of those cartoons that there are some people who just get it and love it. And I'm like, oh, I wish I could be that person. And that was actually, I'd recently read something about it. I think it was whoever his publisher was, William Randolph Hearst or somebody. It was his favorite cartoon.
Oh, okay.
So he just let him do whatever he wanted. It was just like, no, you're running this cartoon. It doesn't matter. It's my favorite. Doesn't matter if it's anyone else's favorite. I own the newspaper. Because I don't think it was ever a super popular cartoon.
I don't know. It's just that I do know that there's many artists who always loved it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember hearing about Crazy Cat when I was a kid. Are you a Crazy Cat fan, Chris? That's a no.
I've never given it a chance.
Ah, okay. It's great to look at. You'll love it.
It looks great. Undeniably, it looks awesome.
Yeah. How about you, Paulo?
I've heard of Crazy Cat. I've seen it around. Never thought about reading it. I don't think of humor strips as the most interesting in the history of newspaper strips.
I'm not even claiming that Crazy Cat is a humor strip. It's surrealism most of the time. I mean, it really is at least worth checking out because it's not a humor strip like anything you've seen.
So compared to Little Nemo in Slumberland,
it is nothing like Little Nemo.
I can't even compare it to anything because there is nothing like it since.
I think I might compare it to Little Nemo in Slumberland, but the aesthetic is completely different. And there's not really gags in Crazy Cat. Little Nemo at least occasionally had like a nod to it. The gag was he woke up at the end kind of thing after having this adventure. Crazy Cat, it's often, I most hear it described as there's three characters: Officer Pup, Crazy Cat, and who's the mouse?
Ignatz?
What was that?
Ignatz?
Ignatz the cat, the mouse. And Crazy Cat is in love with Ignatz the mouse, but the mouse just likes throwing bricks at Crazy Cat. And Officer Pup is always arresting Crazy Cat or Ignatz for whatever shenanigans they get up to. And it's just this and that's the basis of it. And then you get a strip that all this nutty stuff is going on in, and at the end you're like, what was that? Bricks are being thrown, stuff, and there's this crazy landscape drawing. You don't know where they are.
It is very surreal. And I remember there was a cartoon shorts that would appear, I think, on a PBS show. And again, didn't make sense there either.
Yeah. I get an odd feeling when I love the art in a book but can't read it. I enjoy the experience but somehow feel frustrated or like I wasted my money. It's an odd feeling I can't place. I know what you mean. You know what it is? You feel like a failure. I feel when that happens, I feel like a failure. Like, I really like this art, but I can't read it. What's wrong? What am I missing? And sometimes it's like I finally read, after 15 years, Jimmy Corrigan, The Smartest Boy on Earth, which I love the artwork on, but never could read that dreadful writing. I started reading it like a comic strip, where I read 1 or 2 strips a day and put it down. And I ended up liking it, reading like that. Because I don't think it was meant to be read as a 400-page graphic novel. It was meant to be read in little doses. So it's like, yeah, exactly. It's not even that it's a failure. It's like I feel like a failure for not getting it. That's if I like the artwork, if I think there's something there. Like I'm like, why don't I get this? I mean, I like 75% of it, but I'm missing that last 25% to say I really like it. What am I missing? That's what, and I feel like it's me sometimes, and not, and sometimes it's just you can't like everything, but I wonder why I can't like it. Like The Smartest Boy on
we're
Earth
told it's good.
Yeah.
And we just don't know. You don't know what it is, and we're not getting it. And maybe people are just making that up too.
People I trust tell me it's good. Hey, that's how I started liking The Savage Dragon. Finally, The Savage Dragon. I didn't read for the first 70 issues but it was always Chris's favorite book. It was steadily his favorite book for 5 years, and I read an issue of it here or there, and I went, God, dumb Image comic. Then after 5 years of Chris rushing on Wednesdays to get the new Savage Dragon and then reading it at lunchtime or whatever, I went, I got to start reading the Savage. There's something, if this has been Chris's book for 5 years, there's got to be something good about it that I am missing.
If this idiot loves this book this much,
he wore me down. I said, maybe I'm the idiot for not loving. It's not like he loved it for a year or two and then went, I don't like it anymore. I'm not interested. So I put Savage Dragon on my pull list. And it turned out to be the best time, too, because it's when he blew up the world and went full Kirby, which is more up my alley than the early stuff was. And I've been buying it and loving it ever since. I mean, it took me a little while to catch on to it, and then I went back and got those first 70 issues and liked them, too. I mean, I ended up reading, like, around issue 200 came out, I reread issues 1 through 200. And I got to say, you can really, it's a good long read because everything changes over time. He doesn't repeat himself. It takes place in real time. And
I read
characters grow and live and die and change.
I read an article somebody was writing about it, and they made this point, and I was like, that is really true. That like a lot of books that have different eras, like the Savage Dragon has many different eras in it, which is all the same creator all the way through. But there's definitely different periods,
right,
and eras of the book.
Tit Goblin says here, like I said, I respect Ghost World, but I try to read it a good 5 times. I always liked I'm a big Daniel Clowes fan, so I was reading Ghost World as it came out. And I always liked it, but wasn't a favorite. What made it click for me? Ghost World, when I read, because sometimes something can be a little esoteric. When I was reading an interview or something with Dan Clowes about Ghost World, and he said that Ghost World is a lot of Ghost World is influenced by his Jewish half and his Protestant half. And the two characters are those two halves of him talking. And after I read that, Ghost World made a lot more sense to me. And I liked it even more. So
I never read
sometimes a little bit of information.
I never read the book. I saw the movie, did not like it, never went looking for the book because of it. And I really should not judge the book by its movie.
Right.
But again, it was one of those things where it's like, if the book is anything like this, I'm not even going to look for it. And I never did.
I really enjoy the book. The movie's quite different in that, like, well, first of all, the Steve Buscemi character isn't even in the comic.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes it a completely different story right there. But it's kind of the two halves of him talking, but not so much as like in the book, those two characters are like really by themselves, kind of intensely. It's really a small piece. Once you make it into a movie and add more characters, it becomes bigger and broader. So it's much narrower in the book. But like I said, it's a favorite of mine now. But still, my favorite Daniel Clowes might be David Boring. But I'm a big fan of his. I enjoy all his stuff. But I guess it's about time to wrap up now, so Paulo can get to bed.
I do have a day off tomorrow.
What was that?
I do have a day off tomorrow, but I work Sunday.
4-hour show. Let's go.
Yeah, around Christmas, I did 2 6-hour shows in one day.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and Jared showed up doing his Bob Ross impersonation.
All right. James Gildersleeve really enjoys Ghost Rider and Ice. Yeah, I really enjoy all Clowes stuff. There's like what Death Ray is a really good one. That was his like superhero one. Now that asshole is asleep. All right, we're going to end on that note. Everybody have a good night out there.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
We'll catch you next week.